You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast for Teka Teka News. In this episode,
why migration is very gendered. Kasi alam natin, di ba, in all your news, the face, unfortunately, of many abuse and killings and exploitation of migrants, unfortunately, is the face of a woman.
officials from the Philippine government and the United Nations marked the end of a 5-year program that was meant to aid in the effort to keep overseas Filipino migrant workers safe. But they're the first to admit that the work is far from over.
More than 60% of the population is women. Ang distribution nila more in the precarious skills, sa language namin sa ILO, and domestic work, etc. 60% of that of OFWs are in there, pero 8 out of every 10 nasa precarious jobs are women. Kaya hindi ka taka-taka na whenever there are abuses, they are the first to face that consequence.
That's Rex Verona from the International Labour Organization, or the ILO, an agency of the UN.
I'm managing the Safe and Fair program now, and as was said earlier, this is actually an ASEAN-wide program. It's being implemented in the 10 ASEAN countries, so Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, etc., and the Philippines. And we are managing the Philippines side of things. And as mentioned, the project will start in 2018 and it will culminate at the end of this month.
The Safe and Fair program was launched 5 years ago as part of an initiative between the European Union and the UN to eliminate violence against women and girls. Its objectives were to reduce the vulnerability of women migrant workers to trafficking and violence, and to give them access to quality assistance. So what has it achieved since then?
But the first one is the creation of the DMW. So we heavily intervened in the crafting of RA 11641, now which is what created the Department of Migrant Workers. Why did we do that? Because you said the project ends, it dies after its lifetime. But if it's institutionalized in policy, then it lives forever. So kaya we intervene in a lot of language of the bill. For example, I think Section 15, on ensuring that overseas abroad no migrant worker officers, polo sila dati, will have gender focal persons and ending law.
That stands for Ending Violence Against Women.
Focal persons is a language actually that we have pushed. The second intervention that we made is on the law that created the Office of the Social Welfare Attaché. You know that we have labor attaches, right? Dealing with contracts and employment relations. But we also know that many of the distress cases involve families and again women, etc. So the Social Welfare Attaché deal with those concerns. Pero whereas we have many labor attaches, we have a handful only of social welfare attaches.
The law that created a central office for social welfare attachés for OFWs was enacted in 2019. The office has since been absorbed by the Department of Migrant Workers.
And then finally, ang third na mahalaga is the Senate finally unanimously concurred with ratification of Convention 190 of the ILO. And that's historic because the Philippines will be the first in Asia to ratify that. That is the international treaty of the ILO to end violence and harassment in the world of work. That is important because not only in the Philippines but also for our OFWs abroad, na yung workplaces nila, including the homes where they work, now we'll have a channel to report violations and access to redress.
All of this sounds good in theory. But as Rex himself pointed out at the beginning of this episode, the reports of Filipinos suffering abuse abroad continue. At this same event, marking the culmination of the Safe and Fair initiative, Migrant Workers Assistant Secretary for Land-Based Services Jerome Alcantara was asked about the execution of 2 Filipinos in China. They were convicted of drug trafficking. Here's what he said.
Tama po yan sa servisyo binibigay ng pamahalaan, sa commitment to all of the Filipinos na kapag nasa labas ka ng bansa, karoon ka ng problema, tutulungan ka. Pero ang primary agency charge po dito ay Department of Foreign Affairs. Kasi sa I understand, hindi po sila Filipino workers, hindi sila worker at the time, from what I understand of the case. And wala pong migrant workers office pa sa China. So ang usapan po namin ng DFA, pag halimbawa wala pa kaming opisina doon, sila muna yung magbibigay ng legal assistance. So ang sinisiguro po natin na lahat halos na nakakulong, lahat na nagkakaproblema, ano po yan, tinutulungan na embahada, binibigyan ng abogado, dinadalaw po yan, minomonitor at tinitingnan kung ano po yung kanilang kondisyon. Yun nga lang, mahirap magkomento doon sa justice system ng ibang bansa.
Another Filipino migrant worker, Mary Jane Veloso, has been on death row in Indonesia since 2010. She was convicted of drug trafficking, but maintains that she was tricked into serving as a drug mule by a recruiter. Her parents say she's a victim of human trafficking.
For us, siguro ang pinakamalaking ambag itong safe and fair sa aming gawain ay yung pagsisiguro na yung gender lens ay integrated sa aming iba't ibang mga larangan ng gawain sa migration.
That's Ellen Sana, Executive Director of the Center for Migrant Advocacy.
So whether it's at the advocacy, sa community capacity building, sa research, etc. I think consistently yun yung challenge kasi we can always talk about, we have to have a gender lens or it has to be human rights framework. But then exactly what do we mean by that? Lalo na dun sa usapin ng gender issues, gender-based violence. So I think yun yung in the last 6 years of Safe and Fair, hopefully yung 6 na taon, because of course change doesn't happen overnight, yung sensitization, gender sensitivity, crossing over to gender responsiveness, and eventually gender transformation. Hindi siyempre iba-iba yung level ng achievement, but I think that's one very big contribution of the Safe and Fair. Na consistently, yung human rights kasi, you can always say, tayo tao. But in terms of our application of that, madalas tayo gender blind. Now, we do not see the difference between the man and the woman, and in the case of migration, yung recognizing that men and women migrants would have different experiences, different journeys, different channels in crossing the borders. And I think mahalaga yun that we become conscious of that.
Here's Rex Verona, ILO's National Project Coordinator of the Safe and Fair program again.
Next year, we will mark 50 years of Philippine labor migration. Kasi, di ba, so Labor Code of 1974 siya first na institutionalized that we will send out workers. And then, so next year, so parang it makes us reflect back. Now, how long can we sustain this? And how long should women go out there and be abused in this way?
That's why for the Department of Migrant Workers, making sure OFWs have the option to come home is as important as protecting them while they're abroad. Here's Assistant Secretary Alcantara.
Yung ginagawa po yung batas na gumawa doon sa Department of Migrant Workers, ang isa sa pinakamalaking pagbabago na nakita namin at naramdaman namin ay yung mas matinding focus sa reintegration. And doon po sa batas, and I think this is one of the contributions of not only the project but also of the other development partners and the OFW stakeholders, meron po kayong makikita doon na phrase na Full Cycle National Reintegration Program. Kami po sa departamento, yan po yung isa sa pinaka-importante. When we say Full Cycle National Reintegration Program, bago pa lang po umalis yung migranteng manggagawa, dapat po may plano at may nakahanda ng suporta sa kanya para sa kanyang pagbalik. Habang siya ay nasa kanyang trabaho, ligtas siya, patas yung kanyang kondisyon ng trabaho at pag-uwi niya, meron siyang oportunidad para sa masaganang buhay. And hindi lang po ito Department of Migrant Workers. One of the first official act of the President and the late Secretary was to bring this to the cabinet level. No? We diniscuss po ito dun sa ibang mga department secretaries, and the President himself directed all the departments to come up with programs for the reintegration of OFWs.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was edited by Joe Salcedo. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior news editor is Veronica Uy. Thanks for listening.